Hello, my friends, and welcome to the podcast where our goal is to remind you that amidst the chaos and craziness of the world today, there is still plenty of good that is worth shouting about. In each episode, we highlight the stories of another creator of good in the world. Nonprofit, for-profit, it doesn't matter. We know that when you use what you have to add to the world, we can make the world better. This is Creating Good with me, Matt Barnes. Let's create some good. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Creating Good with Matt Barnes. I'm Matt Barnes. You know, you can find me anywhere online at Matt from Rogue. That's my handle on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, you name it. I'm on there as at Matt from Rogue. If you're looking to connect with me, I love to connect with people. That's why I do these things. Also, we do this one in particular because we are all about creating good in the world. We have a movement that we want you to be a part of. We want you to realize the different ways that you uniquely can create good in the world because of the specific talents and experiences and resources that you have. And when we come together with other people, even more of that can happen. This podcast is to tell us the stories of people who are doing that and inspire us and get us excited about that, because we all have those opportunities, but the world is constantly feeling like it's burning down around us, and we kind of tend to focus on the negative, but there's so much positive, there's so much good, and we can be a part of pushing the good. So that's what this is all about. You can go to creatinggood.co to see all the other things that we've got going on. I've said this a couple times. We've got a lot of big stuff coming up that we're going to be announcing in the next few months. We're really excited about. Take the pledge at creatinggood.co/pledge. It's just a pledge to create good. And you can put the badge on your website just to let people know that you have committed to creating good in the world, to adding to the world, and not just taking from it. So really excited about that. Today, I've got a great guest on the show who does that. And he is Howard Levy. He is he's such a cool guy. He is the president of the Red Rooster Group. It's a marketing design firm that specializes in branding, marketing, and fundraising for nonprofits. That's how good I am today. And businesses aiming to make a positive impact in the world. Very similar to what I've been doing at Rogue Creatives. He's just been doing it longer. He's been doing this for 30 years. He has revitalized organizational brands, created effective campaigns. He's just done all kinds of stuff. He's telling amazing stories of people changing the world. He's using what he has to highlight those things. And that, so we had a lot to talk about. We're right on the same page there. And I just really enjoyed my conversation with Howard. All right, welcome Howard Levy to the program. Thank you so much for being here today.
Nice to be here, Matt.
Yeah, so you said you've listened to a few episodes, so you know we always start with a segment called 3 Random Questions. Are you ready?
All right.
It's great because you can't really prepare for it because they're random. I didn't even know what they were going to be until a few minutes ago. All right, what is a lesson you've learned in the past week?
Plan ahead.
Plan ahead?
I think I'm had so much going on. My focus was on time management this week, setting priorities. I always try to do that, but staying focused on those priorities.
It is difficult, isn't it? Yeah, all the things pulling at you.
Yeah.
All right. Have you ever been on TV or in a movie?
Not specifically, but I was almost in a movie as a stand-in, as you'd call it, insofar as I was in the window of a restaurant that was being filmed, but that shot did not make the cut.
Oh, do you know what it was for?
It was in Shaft. Yeah, it was filmed
nice.
in the dark, and Samuel Jackson was there across the street doing his thing, and pacifier, they said go, and the people would walk back and forth in front of the window where I was just sitting there. But that shot didn't make it in.
It's crazy how much time they will spend on one tiny shot that then will get cut. And they paid, and the whole thing, they'll spend a whole day sometimes on, or days on a shot that they end up, we're not going to use that. It's crazy. And then last question, how'd you sleep last night?
Actually, okay. Surprising. Because typically, I got 2 young kids that
there you go.
Going, and in summer, but less, so they've been up late. But last night, I actually got good sleep.
Oh, that's good. That's good. How old are your kids?
9 and 11.
9 and 11. Those are good ages. That's fun. Boys or girls?
Two girls. They keep me going.
Nice. Awesome. Kids are the best, though, man. They're so fun.
They are.
Cool. Well, you have successfully answered the questions. You have passed the test. I will now let you proceed on to the interview because I judge everything. So no, I'm so excited to talk to you because you and I have very similar backgrounds, similar interests, and I'd love getting different perspectives from people doing things that are in the world that I'm interested in. So you are the president of Red Rooster Group, right?
Right.
Well, first of all, give us your origin story. Where'd you start? How'd you get to where you're at?
That's great. I started out as an activist at Brooklyn College. It's part of the City University system of New York.
Okay.
Uh, this is back in 1991, from 87 to 91, to give you some context of
You seem
my
you
age.
don't look that old. You look young. You look
I
younger
know,
than
I
that.
know. I do look very young.
That's nice.
Yeah, yeah. I guess they worked against me for so long. Maybe now it's
Right
actually,
now it's paying off. Now you get to
yeah,
live in
yeah,
the
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. And so I was head of the chapter at Brooklyn College of New York Public Interest Research Group. There's a lot of these PIRGs out across the country, started by Ralph Nader as consumer activist groups that would advocate on behalf of different interests. And we were working on government reform at the time um, and recycling in New York City. They were closing down the Fresh Kills landfill, and they were starting recycling. So we're advocating for recycling a higher percentage of waste in New York City at the time. And so it was the scrappy pre-computer going out to put a table out and ask people to write letters and, show
Nice.
up at City Hall, and those kind of things, just getting on the ground work on organizing, people for making a change in society. But I looked at
Sure.
other profits. I saw, there's a real need for effective communications and outreach. This is going back, in the United States at that time. Now there's about 1.5 million nonprofit organizations. At the time, there was half of that. It was about
Mm,
600,000. Many of them were smaller. Certainly, there were these old legacy organizations, Red Cross and so forth that we have
sure.
heard of. But it exploded in the last 20 years. And they weren't many communications from doing this. I think I was one of the earlier ones at least on the East Coast. Maybe on the West Coast they were already doing those things. But I said there's a need here to have a communications firm that helps these especially small nonprofits that need to tell their story, create their brand. And I wouldn't even say websites at the time because that wasn't
Yeah.
even happening. But tell their story to the world and engage people around their mission. So that's what I've been doing ever since, and now more, strategic, sophisticated way with, data analysis and behavioral economics and, storytelling and all the modern stuff that we have nowadays.
Yeah. And so that's what you're doing with the Red Rooster Group.
That's right. That's right. We work with, our organizations across a range of issues. We pretty much, if you name it, we probably work with that type of organization. Lots
Now,
of social service, human service organizations.
okay. Do you exclusively work with nonprofits or do you work with for-profits as well?
Yeah, we're exclusively focused on nonprofits.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So obviously, yeah, you and I have a lot in common. You're way ahead of me on the curve. So I want to steal as much as I can from you and learn and and grow.
To that.
Yeah, my background in organizational leadership and education, and then bringing all that together for, branding and storytelling, and then because of my background with nonprofits and that of some of my team, and just the way it happened, we started gravitating towards so many nonprofit clients and seeing a lot of success there and becoming sort of experts in the nuances of how to do that. What for you has been, the biggest challenge, I guess, in or what ongoingly is that even a word? I don't know. Is a
Sure, why not?
I made it up. I was an English major. I can do that. What on an ongoing basis is maybe the biggest challenge for storytelling? I mean, there's so many, but for nonprofits in particular.
I think them just understanding the essence of what a good story is.
Sure.
I think I've seen a big shift from, I'll date myself. I don't know. You go back and the whole Sally Struthers images of, the Save the Children, the starving African kid, and so there's the story there is, negative, you could help, to a positive outcome.
Right.
Now there's such a worry, I don't know, sensibility about framing people in a positive way, providing the dignity, not patronizing people. And so there's been
Right.
a shift of this idea of positive stories, and let's kind of showcase people in their best light, not in the worst moments of their life, particularly when you're talking about poverty or homelessness or hunger, things like that.
Yeah.
But the human psyche is still drawn to the transformation of someone from, a
Hmm.
before state to an after state. And I think a lot of nonprofits capture the after state, but unless you're getting somehow to before, you're not really getting the transformation of what your organization has provided, the
Sure.
value. And particularly like I think what often they miss is the emotional state. So there's like kind of what we did, and there's kind of the outcome. But to me, the essence of a good story is how someone has gone from a negative emotional state. And what is that? Like that lack of hope, that total
Yes.
despair, a feeling of hopelessness, lack of agency, in their life. Maybe
Yeah.
they're separated from their kids, maybe, whatever it is, they don't have the ability to do something. And there's a real frustration there. And there's an emotional intensity that needs to be communicated.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of it, like it's great that that person has, the food, they're reunited, they have the shelter, or whatever it is. What is their emotional state now?
Yeah.
And so even if you just told the story, like from, despair to, joy, like what does that, journey look like? What's the language that they're using to express that,
Yeah.
both on the front end and on the back end? And I think capturing those is difficult for nonprofits. So to answer your question, like one of the biggest challenges is really capturing the full essence of the story, not just kind of the what happened, but how someone was actually feeling and their emotional journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's it is this ongoing challenge, but you also have so you've got the components of ethical storytelling, like you're talking about, and making sure that you are presenting, like you said, somebody not in their worst moments of their lives. And then on top of that, though, even if that wasn't an issue, the Sally Struthers sort of approach or Sarah McLachlan song sort of approach of the past, what I find, or what I've found, and I'd love to hear your perspective, is that people know the world sucks. Like we're reminded of that all the time, probably now more than ever, more than when those commercials were on the air. But like we're, constant push notifications of how the world's falling apart and all of that. And what people respond to, even just from a strategic standpoint, even taking the ethical side out of it, not that we should, but like for this moment, is hope, is excitement, is the positive of yes, we know there's problems and you can state those problems and we can present those problems, but we're solving them. We're digging in. We're becoming the experts on this. We're going out there and and there is this hope and excitement and you can see that. And I think when my viewpoint and experience has been when you can get people caught up in that, then they come along, then they're invested in the story, then they're a part of the story, they come along for the ride. They're more likely to come along for, instead of just like, oh, I'll give you $20 to make me feel better in this moment. I want to be a part of this ongoing thing because it's awesome.
That's exactly right. I mean, the real essence of a story for a nonprofit, at least as it pertains to fundraising, is making the donor the hero of the story. They're the ones who are empowering and enabling this to happen. So it's not just like, here's a nonprofit doing something, give us some money. It's like how you can activate your desire to do good in the world.
Yes.
And how to, and that's manifest in the work, that we're doing. So you're enabling, that to happen. That's
And
really the essence of, how that storytelling happens is
absolutely.
activating.
And I think that speaks to such a bigger issue that we have in culture right now, which is how people view nonprofits. And I think because a lot of, before we started recording, we were talking about uncharitable, which my listeners maybe get sick of me talking about because I bring it up all the time. But, this idea that we're just always sort of the downers, sort of seen as, I mean, somebody on the podcast recently said, we're the only industry or the only area defined by what we're not. as a non
Right.
we're non-profit. So, this idea that like you don't invest money into this. Hey, go, we're asking you to go solve all the world's problems, and the biggest problems in the world, but do it on a shoestring budget. Don't pay people well. Don't spend money on, even though your core mission is to bring about awareness so that people can support this thing. But if you do marketing, that's overhead, and so we're going to punish you for that. And it's very conflicting. That is a huge area of struggle for people with storytelling, I think, as well. But helping the public to see that nonprofits are not just great at asking for money and begging for money all the time. They're not just salespeople. They're conduits for you to be a part of a story that can affect change in the world.
Yeah, yeah. There's two
So,
areas I want to talk about, if you'd
yeah,
like to.
let's do it.
Both on the table, and we'll see how they go. One is the number of donors in the United States is declining. In other words, the population is going up, but the percentage of the people in the United States who are actually donating to nonprofits is shrinking. More wealthy people are giving. More of the money that are going to nonprofits is coming from wealthy donors, and so fewer Americans are giving. So the question there is, what implications does that have for us as a society, where people are not feeling connected to the solutions and to the agency of organizations that are providing these things? And you could ask, what is there? Is there a moral issue with that? What does that do for the control? If larger donors are making more of the donations and driving more of the decision making, they're having more power to decide who's getting money, and then dictating what happens in terms of priorities on solving social issues and things like that. So you could say there's this kind of creeping issue of lack of engagement in society that's further bifurcating people. The closer people, even for lower income people who used to donate even a small percentage, of their money, and they're kind of closer to some of the problems. So that's great. It's like we all feel connected and we all feel vested, in our society, as opposed to like, oh, let the rich people, take care of that, or those are not my problems.
Yeah. So why is that? Like, what do you think? Like, why is donorship? Is it the economy? Is it just a lack of understanding? Is it a mistrust of nonprofits? Where do you see that coming through?
I think there's I think there's a combination of all those things. I don't have a definitive answer for you, Matt, but it's probably, I think there's a slow shift in economic equality, in this country. More money is just going up to the top. People are just feeling disenfranchised from the whole system, lack of agency in society, as a whole. Revenue, and during COVID, that just kind of kicked the ass out of people's revenues and stuff like that. So that, kind of certainly didn't help. And I think there's probably a feeling of resentment over affluence and people who are, look, just imagine Bill Gates is like a villain for a portion of society now.
Yeah.
The largest philanthropist who's trying to eradicate, disease and all kinds of things. So, there's this sensibility that people are George Soros, as well, that they're money, all this money is not actually helping. It's actually going for nefarious purposes. We don't want to have any part of the system. So it's kind of now, let's just, step back from this whole thing and not have anything to do with it and wash our hands.
Yeah. 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 It's a hard thing because there's some contradictions in there as well, where you're going, okay, yeah, the wealthy people, the this, the that, we're disenfranchised, we feel disempowered, but yet supporting nonprofits, being a part of their stories, is a great way to have agency and to have a say in the world and how, the problems that need to be fixed. So is our messaging off? Is that where, we spend a lot of time, I know we do, and based on what you've said, you do, telling the stories of sort of the clients and that stuff for our nonprofits. Are we, and not should necessarily ignore that, but are we missing out on telling the stories of people who have been able to have impact so that others can see, ooh, I want that?
Maybe. I think there might be strategic decisions made above the pay grade of what stories we tell, but strategically, if you looked at where money is coming in, a director of development would say, let's go after larger donors because we're going to get a better return on investment. And that's not even try to do this retail fundraising and try to get people to give a first gift of $10 or $20 or things like that. So if you're a small organization and you're starting out, you're asking a legitimate question of where are we going to invest our time and energy in fundraising. You may say, like, should we really be trying to build up, a lower level, donor base? Or, if
Right.
you've been around for a certain period of time and it's really small and you have to say, we have to spend time either on X or Y, we're going to, put it at the higher level. And I'm saying maybe that's not the greatest choice to make, because you do want to
Right.
have equity. You want to have people in your community have a stake in the problems and solving the problems in your community, and not just focus on, more affluent donors. So strategically and kind of morally, there might be two different answers, to that.
Well, but strategically, I mean, if you're thinking short term or long term as well. So that's where I'm always, I always encourage people to find the balance. We tend to want to go to one extreme or the other. We're going to do all large donors. We're going to focus on and finding, maybe from the financial model, the main focus to get started is on the large donors, but how are we engaging other people to be a part of the story still, looking at it holistically and long term, because you get in. I think you brought this up briefly before we started recording, but you get in these situations where some large donor is holding you hostage because they're saying, if you want my money, you're going to do this or you're not going to do that, and then you're in a place where if you lose them, or maybe they die, or maybe they, whatever it could be, they move on to a new passion for them or whatever it is, and you're so dependent on them, you're screwed. I mean, it's the same issue in business. Like when I started my agency, I had 3 really big clients and they were funding everything and it was great. And then we lost one of them very,
Right.
very suddenly. And it was like, oh, there's a third of our income gone.
Right.
And realized, oh, those smaller clients, having the stability of some of those smaller clients is nice, and finding that balance there of, yeah, it's great to have the big ones and to go after them, but also to have some of these, a bunch of these smaller ones where if you lose one, it doesn't financially impact you quite as much. And finding that balance, and nonprofits, I think, need some of that. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to kind of, the other idea I had, which is dovetailing off of this, is like 10 years or 15 years ago, I had this idea. It was based on, I think it actually presaged the charitable idea, the Dan Pelota's idea. Says
Yeah.
that nonprofits, there's 2 different rule books, one for businesses, one for
Mm-hmm.
nonprofits. Nonprofits, business could go and raise capital. You could pay people money, fair compensation to attract top talent. You could advertise and market. No one's criticizing you for spending a ton of money on that.
Right.
You could take risks and fail, and that's part of the product cycle of testing new things out. And nonprofits, right, can't do any of those things. So I had this vision for a new type of nonprofit that could set a new playbook.
Yeah.
Which was like, we'll call it a limited duration nonprofit. So it's just chartered for a period of time, like 7 years or 10 years.
Yeah.
And you're chartered to solve a problem, not just provide services, not say, help, say homelessness in an area is like, not
Yep.
just to kind of temporarily have a stopgap measure, but to actually fix the problem. And you'd be able to, knowing that you're going to go out of business in 10 years,
Yeah.
7 years, whatever it is, you'd hopefully be able to do all those other things. You'd be able to kind of raise money. You'd be able to spend the money to solve the problem. You'd be able to pay people a lot of money to come and try to solve the problem, attract top minds from different areas that have expertise, on the area, not worry about, that limitation. Take risks, because the first 2 years you're learning about it. Third year, fourth year, you're trying things, you're testing. Fourth, fifth year, you're testing and failing again. No one's expecting you to solve it then, so you're free to do that.
Sure.
And by year 10, say either you've solved it or you've learned something, and then you turn that all becomes public knowledge and information, and you could apply for another, application to do it again, or reassemble new teams, re-engage,
Yeah.
bigger, other money, other donors, other constituents, or whatever. So it's just a different way of nonprofits thinking about what they do, is solving the problem in a very concrete way. And I think there is a lot of institutionalization of nonprofits providing great and needed services, but not really moving the needle on actually solving the problems.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I've I've had that thought as far as for-profits go. There are some some for-profit, some any organizations. There's some organizations that are and should be very much why-based organizations. Like I would encourage anyone to be really focused on their why instead of their what. But occasionally you get these, and maybe not even occasionally, maybe often you get these organizations somebody who starts something because they have a what. They have something they figured out, this thing that they can do or that they can build, and they haven't really thought beyond that. It's just, I got this product and it can do this thing. And what I've seen so many times on the for-profit side is the short-sightedness of, I've got this product, it can do this thing. Because it's not a why-based organization, they do that great. And then when technology moves beyond that or society moves beyond that and that thing's irrelevant, then suddenly they go out of business and they seem shocked. And to me, I'm like, are there certain things where if it's based on that, it should just be almost planned obsolescence? Like you should almost be like, we're going to start this business. It's going to last us 3 to 5 years. And we know that unless we come up with something else, we're shutting it down after that, because that's how long the lifespan of this product is. And for a nonprofit to do the same thing would be an interesting approach.
Yeah. I mean, even a large nonprofit could spin off something like that.
Absolutely.
So it gives it a little autonomy, hire a separate director for that, attract separate funding, have a different way, rules that they're allowed to, take those risks and try new things.
It's interesting
I'd love to see more nonprofits do those kinds of things and be able to kind of escape the chokehold of donors. I think that is real for many organizations. Behold, to that and try to set a different playbook for themselves. It's interesting because many of the board come from the business world.
Yeah.
And yet all of a sudden get into the boardroom there and it's like, oh, we have a different set. And, in Dan Pelota's book, is really interesting. He does go back to the origins of this, Calvinistic, thought that is charity is penance, for the hard work that we're doing. And we should feel guilty for earning all this money. And so we can kind of whitewash it, so to speak, by putting it into the nonprofit sector. And therefore, those rules have to be different. Otherwise, like, it's not cleansing our guilt of making all the money,
Well, there's that in there. I think the other issue is ego, and you get people who, I mean, like even they made the great point in the documentary of, somebody who graduates from Harvard Business School or whatever, and they could go out in the public sector and get a job starting, running a company for $450,000 a year, or take a $100,000 or less job being an executive director of a nonprofit. Well, they're smart enough to know I can give away a third of my $450,000 salary, get a board, get the tax write-off, get a board seat on that thing, on that organization, get all the credit now, and tell that executive director how they're going to do their job. So
exactly.
You also get ego in there, and you get people who, what I have seen, and I think this speaks to what you were talking about of setting your own playbook. When I've worked with smaller nonprofits or people who want to start a new nonprofit, my first thing is always like, are you sure? But if it's, advisable to actually do that, I tell them, like, you need to set the rules from the beginning very clearly with your board, with your donors, setting the rules, setting the, like, we don't, why we don't do directed giving, and here's why, or whatever it might be, to give you the freedom to actually grow this thing and become the experts and try things and all of that. There are people who will always reject that no matter what, because they don't think that that's what nonprofits should do. But you do get people who, if you start that way, they come into it with that mindset, and they're a little more open to those things and to setting you up. I wonder if part of that was this 8 or 10 year plan of obsolescence of, let's do this so that we can put ourselves out of a job kind of thing. If people would be more willing to see nonprofits that way, and also be willing to invest in a way where it's like there's a plan. Because, I mean, if you're saying 8 or 10 years, I'm assuming you've got some sort of a plan, at least an outline of a plan, and a direction. You have ideas, and an idea of what it's going to take, and budget, and all of that kind of stuff. And you have an end goal, a very clear end goal. So you might be more likely to get people to jump on board financially and, giving their time and all that.
That'd be the idea, making it really concrete, actionable, and having some specific outcome as opposed to just kind of an ongoing,
Right, right, right.
ongoing escapade of activity.
Well, that's the thing. Like it's funny because we've done a lot of work with nonprofits that work in the area of homelessness. And even occasionally I'm like, they talk about, and I believe this, we can solve this. We can solve this problem. We can solve homelessness. And I know that part of it is there are people out there who so don't want that problem solved, but and it's become political and it's all these things. And so it's really going to be, but it is possible to solve this. But then at the same time, I'm like, okay, well then let's do a campaign that's, hey, let's put me out of a job. I like, let's make it about that. And they get, whoa, I don't know about that. That's a bit, so, and I'm like, but that's the thing. Like, let's really show people that the goal here is to not need you anymore doing this,
Yeah.
I feel like there's something in that but that fear there, or that because maybe it's so out of the box or different from what's been done. Do you think that's why we haven't seen people doing what you're talking about?
I think there's a lack of imagination, courage, and there's just those boundaries. But not always. I was on a call today, in fact, with someone who started an organization addressing homelessness in
Hmm.
the Silicon Valley area with like a different approach. And it was in some way working from the inside out. He was working with people who were incarcerated, who had come out of the prison system and giving them jobs. They were cleaning the streets. They were connecting with the people in encampments and on the streets. They could understand, people's perspectives. And it's. I think where society is looking more and more toward those kinds of, I don't know what you call them, upside down approaches, rather than kind
Yeah.
of the white man with money helping those who are not white men with without money situation, which is
Yeah.
kind of how philanthropy has been run for 100 years, and there's a lot more, you know, uh, thinking about how to involve the communities who are affected, how to rise, leaders from within those communities to actually solve the problems from their perspective because they know best because they're the ones experiencing the problems. And so I think there is a great, as a whole, we're still, there's a whole legacy of, those 1.5 million nonprofits, marching in a direction. But I think that there is, over the last 10 years, a huge, or not a huge, there's this emergence of a new way of thinking about problems. I mean, even Ford Foundation had kind of rethought about what their philanthropic application and approach was, and like let's really look at this from the ground up and ask the people in the countries that we're supplying the money for, because look, it's not working. I mean, in
Right.
in many cases we're just not, whether here or overseas, how many billions went into Africa with no real results, so we do have to involve people who are, they have to rise up, and we have to empower people to solve their own problems, as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And as you're talking, I'm thinking back to when we were talking about, why people are giving less. And I wonder if part of it is that sort of a disillusionment of, okay, we've been hearing these messages for, since the 80s, on our TVs and in movies and all this stuff. And yet it seems like the world is in a lot of ways worse off now than it was before. Now we're just at when there's more people asking for more problems. And the uninitiated person isn't really up on who's doing it innovatively and who's not and all of that kind of stuff. And so it just seems like, all right, this organization, they've been doing it for 30, 40 years. They're doing the exact same thing. They're asking for the same, their campaigns are pretty much the same. Maybe, now they're online, but I wonder if that plays into it, of that, like, yeah, but they're still having to ask, they've been around forever. They're still trying to solve this problem. They're still asking for my money. I don't know. Like, is this a good use of my time and money?
Right, right. I think, there is a general malaise in the country. I mean, and that's, there's a lot of anger, there's rage,
Sure.
there's blame, and all that kind of stuff. So people do feel, um, do feel that. It's funny. I was going to write a blog post. I think I'm going to write this article. I think like kind of what not to get too political, but what kind of in some way what both candidates are really missing, is I'll call it a lack of agency
Yeah.
that people feel in their lives. I don't think anyone's really talking about this. When you get, personally speaking, a hospital bill, we went to the emergency room and get a bill of $4,000, for
Right.
something that was very simple. Like, no, that's just our standard rate. I'm like, you don't have any say in that. There's
No.
no, then the doctor gives you a separate bill. I was a victim of identity theft, and you're like, nothing I could do. I called,
No.
everyone, filed with all the consumer protection agent, FBI, the local police in that place, the bank, like no one's going to do anything. Like
Right.
so, but between medical bills, between financial, you think about how much control you have over your credit history or other people they're taking your information, they're using it to make decisions about you, corporations are just kind of running ramshot or,
Yeah.
our privacy and all that. So I think that there's this growing, I don't know, I'm sensing like that there's our sense of agency has been diminished.
Yes.
And I think if you feel agency, you give to nonprofits, you start businesses, you do things, and when you don't, you're like, oh, and so I think that there's this kind of feeling. Um, I was going to say something. Oh, so on counterpoint though,
Yeah.
is that while we're feeling these things as individuals and as a collective society, the march of history is positive. I mean, all the markers of humankind are positive. Longevity of life, births, deaths at birth, have stemmed, wars, economic prosperity,
Yeah.
we stop poverty, but the billions, I don't know the quotes, but have been lifted out of poverty.
Sure.
India, China have created middle classes, talking about billions now. So yep, it's taken a toll on American workers, and here, which is not good, but overall, things are going much better than they were 100 years ago, 200 years ago, where lifespan was
Absolutely.
worse, where we didn't have access to even the basics of medical care. So when I talk about, the frustration with medical bills, still, in aggregate, people are getting, better care. Rights are, have increased. Can imagine the South 100 years ago. So
Sure.
it's not perfect. We're still marching on, but I think that we have to look like at a wider lens of society, and I think if nonprofits, to kind of bring this back, could show the progress overall that's been making on an issue, if they can show that they're learning. We helped an organization kind of in a fundraising appeal, like we're an evolving and learning organization, not perfect, we're not solving the issue, but here's what we have learned, and here's how we're going to channel our approach now and based on the things that we've learned. I think donors like to hear that. They know
Yes.
there's no one's perfect. They know that the problems aren't all being solved. But if you could have some vulnerability, I think nonprofits can share that. There's a sensibility about being authentic self and all that. But I think but organizations are like, nope, we got to have our bona fides and feel like we're all of our ducks are in a row. But it's tough. You know what? This new thing requires a new approach. We got to figure it out. You're
Yep.
asking for impact things. Well, we got to figure out what those are. We got to hire new staff that has a training. We got to figure out how to hire and train them. I think if there's some more transparency, then nonprofits might be able to actually break through to people and say, yeah, they're, all right, I could relate to that. They're not just trying to ask me for more money to solve a problem that they haven't been solving before with the same approach. I heard that before,
Yeah.
but like, what? All right, maybe that does make sense. Maybe that's worth investing in.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's great. I mean, yeah, we're there's so many ways my head is going right now. I think you and I could probably talk for hours and hours on end, and maybe I'm gonna have to have you back, because there is when you get into the storytelling aspect for nonprofits, there is so much that needs to continue to grow and change. And there's for you and I, as we're working with nonprofits, there's so much that I mean, I can speak for myself. I have to educate the nonprofits and help them think through, let's take a different approach, because most of the time they'll come to us and say, here's what we've done before. Can you make us a newer version of that? Can you, and I'm going, well, is that going to be the most effective thing? Sometimes they don't want to hear that. Sometimes they're just like, doesn't matter, just do it. I'm like, okay. Because
I heard. Yeah.
it's just you get in that cycle and they don't feel empowered to make those types of changes. And so you never know. But what were you going to say?
I was in a seminar recently. It was something really interesting I could relate to and could be useful in this situation. It's you call it a personality index. And there's
Mhm.
lots of things out there. There's, like Myers-Briggs
Sure.
or some of these other ones. So this one, I think it's called KAI, could be mistaken about it. But essentially says there's a continuum, and on one side are adapters. On the other
Mm.
side are innovators. The adapters are slow to change. The mentality is if it's not broke, if it's
Don't fix it.
right. So do that to your point of what the nonprofit's saying, we've always done it this way. That's the mantra of an adapter. On the other side, you have like the extreme is the Silicon Valley types disruptors. Throw it all out,
Sure.
start again. A car is not a car. It's it's a form of transportation. We could rent them. We could have flex things. We can,
Yeah.
just totally reimagine from scratch. But people are in between. But here's the interesting thing. Organizations are also.
Yes.
And I think that the vast majority, certain industries are one side, like tech obviously is all the way on the, innovative
Yeah.
side. But, accounting and law is on the adapter side. They got to follow rules and not going out of the lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
The books have to be done a certain way. Law is based on precedent, the way we've done it before. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything. We'd have chaos. The nonprofits, I think most of them are on that adapter side. And I didn't realize, I never kind of heard of this construct before, but when I look back at a client relationship that I had, I'm like, oh, you know what? There was one person in there who is one way. And they had a new person who was clearly a very high adapter, very far, like
Yeah.
wanted, like, this is exactly the way we do it. And we test against that and we test one variable. And I want to see the metrics of how it was last year. And that's how we're going to do it. Unless you could give me a reason, a logical reason, not your opinion, but, let's see what the open rates or whatever are to justify a change. She had to have justification, for any
Yeah.
change.
Sure.
So I think in understanding where nonprofits as an organization are and how they're going to make a change, and in one of the episodes you're talking about, you're just about like overthrowing the logo or the brand,
Yeah.
like where's that organization, culturally, and
Right.
who's leading that, and what's their parameter for and propensity for that change? Are we just going to kind of go along in the way we are, make incremental, changes, and we're fine with that? Or do we really want to kind of change things and we're willing to risk our brand, on
Yeah.
say it's a risk, but take a bold step, in a positive forward way. And I think understanding that culture and the decision makers specifically who make up that process is important. So, or we step in, the situation like that. I've had that happen before. I go through a whole thing and then someone else comes along, it could be for other political reasons or whatever.
Sure.
But understanding what information they need. So in the case of the adapter, showing that actual evidence, if that's how they make decisions, here are the past campaigns and here's the open range. For the innovator, it'd be showing benchmarks of other organizations who have broken the mold and been successful. Say, here's the evidence that we could do it. We could break out and, and we could be successful also.
Absolutely. And I think it's, it goes back to what I was saying about when I work with startup nonprofits and let's define these things now, because the hard part is when somebody has established themselves as a adapter organization, a maintaining organization, and then they've done that for 20, 30 years. And suddenly they're like, we want to do things different. But the board's like, no, because they've really set that this is who we are. Even this is something I tell people when I do, coaching or that type of stuff as well is, I remember I had a friend that was running an organization and he wanted me to come work for him. And I was excited. I could see all the potential and all the excitement. But as I interviewed and talked to people there, I realized I'm an innovator. I'm always like, what's next? Where could we go? I see all this potential and I get excited about it. And I realized this is a maintaining organization. The people that do well here are the maintainers. The people who get let go are the innovators who try to push the envelope. And I'm going to put myself in a place where I'm either going to have to quit or my friend's going to have to fire me in 6 months, and that would suck. It wasn't a good fit. But I think taking those things into account, as individuals, but as organizations, what type of organization do we want to be? And that might appeal to people more because right now, like I said, I think it's a lot of people maybe feeling like, hey, years and years and years and you're still doing this and why would I give? But if you're like, hey, we're going to try some new things and we want to be the experts in this and fix this thing or whatever, that's easier to get on board with, maybe.
Right.
All right. Well, like I said, we could talk all day. There's so many things, but I want to close with a couple questions that we always ask people. Who in the world of non-profiting, non-profiteering, yeah, who in the nonprofit world would you most want to take to lunch and pick their brain?
I'd love to speak with David Brooks.
Okay.
He's a New York Times. He's a conservative New York Times columnist.
Oh, interesting.
He started as part of the Aspen Institute, a nonprofit called Weave that's intended to bring people together from different perspectives. And he's just wrote a book, one of many books, but on just listening to each other, and how could we actually hear across the different perspectives. And he's worth checking out. He has books. He's got podcasts and videos and all kinds of stuff that you could listen. Yeah, fascinating. And he's just human. I mean, I think he's one of the leading thinkers of today, who looks beyond he sees the immediate, but tries to pull strands together past just what's happening now to have a meaningful contribution. So I would love to speak with him. Yeah.
Awesome. And what is the thing in your job that brings you the most joy?
Well, specifically is some client wins when we can raise real money or tell a great story, craft their brand that's going to resonate. But I'll just look back and be proud of my history, of supporting organizations. I think so many people are in corporate world, and then at some point they reach a decision of like, I want to have something more meaningful, or which is good that they do, or something impacts their life. It could be a major disease of themselves or someone else, or I don't want to say negative things, hit by a drunk drive or something. But they're like, oh, now that becomes the most important thing in their life. And so I just ask young people who are entering society, what's really the most important thing, in your life that you want to do, and don't wait till the end of your life, to do that. Don't wait till some tragedy happens or to someone in your family, that you kind of find that real purposes and service, to humanity. Yeah.
Very good. Well, man, thank you so much, Howard, for being here. Where can people find out more about Red Rooster and connect with you?
redroostergroup.com.
redroostergroup.com.
redroostergroup.com. And we got some resources on there, and you can find us on there. You find me personally on LinkedIn, howardadamlevy.com.
There you go. Awesome. Well, Howard, thanks so much for being here. This is it's great to connect with somebody who's kind of looking at things the same ways that I am, but bringing some different perspectives and like I tell people all the time, the best part of this podcast for me is the hope that I get from hearing from great people who are doing great work all over the world every week, in the midst of the chaos of everything else that's going on. So thanks for being here and for sharing.
Thank you, and kudos to all you're doing.
Thanks. Creating Good with Matt Barnes is recorded at Rogue Collective in beautiful Newport Beach, California. It's hosted and executive produced by me, Matt Barnes. Post-production is by our amazing friends over at Fame, the B2B podcast agency. Writing is by Matt Barnes and Taylor Bolanos from Rogue Creatives. Creative direction and design is overseen by Corey Hill of Rogue Creatives. Theme music is composed and performed by Jared Atherton of Chapters. Huge thanks to our amazing guests for joining us this episode, and thank you to all of you incredible listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, and I would imagine you did if you're still listening, so don't forget to help us spread some good by giving us a good review. Preferably 5 stars, lots of really nice words. It's very helpful. Also, tell your friends and subscribe so we can come straight into your potholes each and every time we have a new episode. Take the Creating Good pledge on our website at creatinggood.co. We'll catch you next time. This has been a Rogue Creatives production.